Hello and welcome, you magnificent beings of light and love. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Do you know that at your core, your higher self, you are mentally and emotionally totally healthy, completely good, powerful like you wouldn't believe, probably don't believe. You are beautiful, and this part of you can never be damaged and never be destroyed. Why? Because you are divine essence. You are created out of the very fabric of Source. Don't forget this. This is Alchemy of Light and Love, and I'm your host, Terry Hager. I'm a psychotherapist and metaphysical teacher of Creating Your Personal Power Field, which is a web/phone course on how to create safety in your life, how to activate your divine inner power, and how to thrive right here on planet Earth. Don't have to wait till we get to heaven. We can bring heaven to Earth. The next series of classes starts January 28th, and it will be a lunchtime series. For more information, go to Therapy for Peace, TherapyForPeace.com. And there's a tab on the left-hand menu for Alchemy of Light and Love. So I want to talk today about the ego, because there is so much confusion about this subject. Your ego, everybody's ego, gets picked on a lot. It doesn't get a lot of respect. There are some spiritual traditions that tell you that you need to get rid of your ego. You need to kill the ego. I see that term. You need to kill the ego. Maybe it's just semantics, but I don't see it that way. I see it a different way. Now, our egos do cause us trouble. They cause trouble in our lives. That is true. But it might not be that they're bad at their core, and maybe we don't have to actually get rid of our egos, but rather transform them. And we do this with love. Love is what transforms. So let's look at it a little bit. Maybe the ego is actually doing the best it can right now. Maybe it needs your help. Maybe it needs the help from your higher self. Maybe it was never meant to take on all the responsibility that it has taken on. So here's a little story. Don't take it, it's like a little metaphor. Don't take it too seriously, okay? When you and I and other human beings first signed up for this physical adventure called being in a physical body, coming to Earth, doing something different, previous to that, we were all in very light, fluffy spirit bodies where there is no danger because it's not a physical environment. So when you came into a physical body, you kept walking into fires and forgetting to eat and walking into snake pits and or having run-ins with wild animals without knowing what to do. And so in that way, you would, and we all, would leave the body prematurely before you had had a chance to do all the things that you wanted to do, because it was great creative fun being here. And it was pretty inconvenient because then you had to find a set of parents to help you get back into the physical realm, and you had to start all over as a baby, not able to talk, and it was really a bother. So you were clever. We were all pretty clever, really. You designed an ego. You designed it to help you live in this physical environment, in this physical body, this dense physical body, and the ego's job, you gave it the job of keeping your body safe and healthy so that you could stay in your physical body long enough to have all the adventures that you wanted to have, and then when you were ready to leave it, you decided when to leave, and you did. So it was a pretty good system. your ego reminded you to eat and sleep and eat greens and put on a scarf in cold weather or some extra fig leaves or whatever it was. If you got too close to a cliff, it would give you a rush of a sense of danger, so you would step back. And if you got too close to a dangerous animal, a mastodon or a dinosaur or whatever, remember I said don't take this too seriously, this story, it gave you a rush of adrenaline so you could run or fight, so you could stay alive, so you could stay in your body. Excuse me. This is a pretty good system. It worked pretty well. For a long time it did. It allowed your higher self, your higher divine spirit, to fully operate, keeping your awareness fully anchored in the knowledge of your oneness with Source, or your inner power, your beauty. So the system was your ego took care of your body, your spirit, your higher self, I'm going to use the term higher self just for simplicity, concerned itself with everything else. And life was really pretty good. I mean, really very good. Then there was, without going into the hows or wherefores, there was a fall in consciousness. And when that happened, your ego lost most of its sense of connection with your higher self. The higher self still existed, it was still there, but we lost, all of us, our sense of connection with it. So this was pretty traumatizing. I mean, very traumatizing for the ego. Without that connection to the part of you that knew how to navigate all those non-physical areas of your life, your ego was really pretty terrified. Imagine, here's an analogy, if there was a little kid, 4 or 5 years old, say a little girl, riding in the back seat of a car, coloring with her crayons, and there was an adult, say a parent, driving in the front seat. It would be sort of like the parent going into a faint. This is not a perfect analogy. It's not really what happened, but just think of it like that, just for the sake of the illustration. So the parent was still there, but not accessible and not able to be in charge. So just imagine how frightening that would be for this poor kid in the back seat. Imagine this kid realizing that there was nobody at the wheel, nobody taking care of the stuff that the kid didn't know how to do. The kid knew how to color. That was it, or eat a sandwich. So imagine now this panic-stricken little girl or boy climbing over the seat into the front seat and trying to drive the car without any knowledge or experience in driving a car. A 5-year-old child, of course, just isn't equipped to drive a car, and it's not supposed to have to drive one. By the same token, your ego is not equipped to run your life. It cannot bring you happiness along with its accomplice, its twin, its helper, I guess you could say, the rational mind, which try to run your life, which try to bring you happiness, but they cannot. It is not possible. That's the higher self's job. But without feeling that connection to the higher self, the ego tries. It really tries. It tries hard. It tries to keep you inside the correct lane, to keep you from having an accident, even though it can't even see over the steering wheel. Your ego is only meant, in the car analogy, to remind you to put gas in the car and get the oil changed and rotate the tires, but never to have to actually drive the car. So, poor ego. Poor ego. Are you getting a sense of compassion now for your ego? What happened then over the eons with the ego trying to take over and run things and losing over time more and more of that sense of connection with its divine aspect, the higher self. What happened then was this ego got so overwhelmed that it split into parts. And those parts got unbalanced and distorted. So in a sense, I mean, this sounds like the definition of multiple personality disorder, a dissociative identity disorder, where an ego splits into parts. And in a sense, it is sort of what happened to all of us. In a sense, we all became mentally ill. Not in the clinical sense, but in a way. The ego was always trying to keep you safe. It always has been trying to keep you safe, even when it makes a terrible, botched up job of it all. It's always trying to keep you safe. Some parts of your ego have been very wounded because everybody else's ego, pretty much everybody else's, also got terrified and overwhelmed and distorted and unbalanced. And so some egos were hurting other egos or impelling the humans to hurt other egos, and then there was war and hardship and terrible harm. So we all do have some parts of the ego that are wounded. Those wounded parts of your ego are waiting for you to help them, and they're not always impatient. And they're not always patient, they are impatient because, and that's when you notice that when you feel those wounded parts and they get triggered and you feel them and you feel upset. Those are your wounded parts telling you, I'm here, I'm not healed yet, I'm not transformed, I'm suffering, help me. We don't realize that. Other parts of our ego say, oh, that's bad, we don't want to feel those things. And so these other parts try to control and manage your life so that you won't feel those bad feelings. So there are a number of different ways. Some egos try to manage your life by controlling other people or by being self-judgmental, judging other people. Almost everybody has that aspect of the ego that is self-judgmental, practically everybody. There are, except for the little tiny kids who know better. Or some ego parts try to always please other people so that other people will always like you and approve of you so you won't be abandoned or hurt or humiliated or hurt in some other way. Or some parts of the ego will try to be an overworker or a perfectionist. There are a lot of different ways that the ego comes up with to try to manage your life so that you won't feel those bad feelings that come from those wounded parts. And then there are still other parts that see that those wounded aspects do get triggered and that you do feel pain sometimes. And so these parts suggest ways to numb out so that you won't have to feel those bad feelings. So that's where all the addictions come in. And other things. There are other ways too. So you can see that your poor little ego is exhausted. All those efforts to control things in your life are really wearing it out. But in spite of that, in spite of being totally worn out, it never rests or hardly ever rests. It rests a little tiny bit occasionally, but not very much because it's afraid you're not going to be safe. Instead of just concerning itself with reminding you to bundle up in the cold weather and eat your spinach, it keeps a sort of a background, constant lookout for danger on all fronts, mentally, physically, in every other way, emotionally, and always, 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 always on alert to protect you, to keep you safe. Doesn't always work. But that is its effort. That's its motivation. So here's how this plays out sometimes. Here's a little example. If a friend, for example, has a bad day and speaks to you in a rude way or a harshly or a sarcastic way or says something that makes it sound as though your friend thinks there's something wrong with you or that you're not okay, your ego will immediately jump in unless you have healed all of this, and in which case you do not need to listen to this anymore. But for the rest of us, your ego will jump in with maybe a defensive remark. How dare you say such a thing? That is not true at all. Well, what about you? Or perhaps a people-pleasing remark. Or in almost all cases, the ego will worry that maybe there really is something wrong with you, because that's one of your ego's favorite themes. There's something wrong with you. You're not okay. Or your ego will suggest maybe that you cut off from the friend so that you'll be safe from any other hurtful remarks. Or your ego may convince you that it would be a very good idea to go get some cookies, even though you just ate an hour earlier. Or that taking smoking back up after you've just spent a year quitting is a very reasonable thing to do, at least just one cigarette. So your ego is often, very frequently in this state of looking around for some way to protect you. And that's what wears it out. Wouldn't it be wonderful if your ego could go back to its original job description of just keeping you physically safe, which it's very well qualified to do, and could just start to phase out of that running the entire show job that it's been burdened with for so long? Take just a moment, close your eyes, and imagine it. You probably can't get there 100% right now, but just imagine, kind of go there in your mind, of a balanced ego that isn't worried and afraid anymore, that is connected with your higher self again. Whew, what a relief. And knows it doesn't have to run your whole life anymore. Just keep you physically safe. Oops, there's a cliff. Back away. There's a car coming. Look both ways before you cross the street. Don't go in that dark alley. It doesn't feel safe. That's your ego's job. Not everything else. Feel that. Feel the relief. The relaxation of knowing that the adult is at the wheel again and that you are okay. Feel that. The problem is your ego's been over-functioning for a very long time now. So it really kind of doesn't know how to give up its responsibilities that are really too adult for it and just kind of go outside and play. This happens, we see this sometimes in families. Another analogy, a pretty good one. If there's a family in which one or both of the parents, for one reason or another, not assigning any blame, is not able to do very good parenting, or is absent completely, or perhaps dies, and there's a vacancy, either on an emotional level or even on a physical level, maybe the parent leaves. If there's a vacancy in that position, very often what will happen in families is, if there are several children, the oldest child, even if they're just two, typically not necessarily, but typically the oldest child will move into that position and act like a parent to the younger children in an effort to keep everybody safe and to keep everybody surviving. It's about just survival, which is where we have been for decades and eons and lifetimes and lifetimes. We've been functioning out of sheer survival. When a friend says something really mean to us, there is a survival, a life or death feel to that, on a bottom basic level. So when this happens in these families, if you've got a child, and a child can take this position sometimes as young as 4 or 5 or 6 years old. I've seen it happen at very, very young ages. And since they don't have any experience or knowledge in how to parent, they typically don't, they may, okay, let's just be generous and say they may not do a really great job at it. Of course, as parents, even when we have kids as adults, we don't always do a very good job. We do the best we can. I didn't always do a very good job, I can tell you that. But in this case, a child is even less equipped than a grown-up, and often becomes very bossy, gets sort of out of control a little bit, bossy and controlling, and may even be mean at times in an effort to keep it all together, keep the family all together, and keep things going along smoothly and keeping everybody in survival, keep them surviving. So those younger siblings may or may not appreciate the older sibling, the one who's taken on that parental role. I have seen, now sometimes they do, but I have seen people come into my office and say, my older sister or brother was horrible, they were so controlling, I can't stand them, I hate them. And again, they don't always do a really great job, but they were kids. They didn't have the equipment to do a great job. And so if they hadn't done what they had done, if they hadn't taken over and done all the things they did, it may have been that those siblings wouldn't have survived or would have been worse off emotionally and psychologically than they really were. So that's kind of how it is. Our egos took on all this responsibility that they weren't supposed to have to. They didn't do a good job of it usually. They haven't done a great job, except that they did help us to survive best it could, not always in a good way. So what do we do now? How do we help this ego? It needs your help, the help of your higher self, your core self. But for so long, we haven't even been in contact with that higher self. But here's great news. During this shift, you've probably heard of a shift in consciousness that's occurring on the planet right now. It's happening because there are these vast, vast waves of love light that are being beamed onto the planet at this time. And it gives you greater and greater access to that higher self than you used to have, than you have had for a very, very long time. You did initially, but for many, many lifetimes you haven't. We haven't. I haven't. So it's that aspect, that divine aspect of you is becoming more and more prominent, but you do have to open up to the love light, and you have to open up to the higher self. So you have to accept that light into you and bring in yourself, your higher self. Because your ego's afraid to let go now, afraid to trust anyone else, even your God essence. Well, sometimes it'll relax a little bit and let your higher self take the wheel a little bit. That's that let go and let God concept. But it's an inner divine self that we're talking about here, which is the same as the outer. So then what happens is the ego may relax a little bit and say, oh yeah, this is great, but then it'll get anxious and nervous because, all that past history, and it'll take over again. And then it gets blamed for causing trouble. And it does cause trouble. There's no question about it. I mean, we've done all kinds of bad things out of our ego. We have hurt people. We've hurt ourselves. We have done things we shouldn't have done. We have not done things that we should have done. Our egos really have made a big mess of things, a lot. How can we help our egos to relax? How can we help them to relax and begin to allow that higher self to take over again? Well, for one thing, imagine, let's go back to the analogy of the family. Suppose there was a parent who had left. Suppose both parents had left. Or perhaps there was only one parent, and that parent left. This older sibling takes over. Maybe these kids live on the street, and the older sibling is stealing things or making the younger ones steal things in order to keep body and soul together. It's not always that stark, but then imagine the parent comes back. The oldest sibling by that time is maybe 10 or 12, and the oldest parent says, okay, I'm back now. I'm in control. You can be a kid again. You don't have to take care of your siblings anymore. You don't have to be in control of them anymore. That's my job. You can imagine that child, 10, 11, 12 years old, would not, number one, trust that the adult was back, and would have a hard time giving up the control and authority that it had because it was afraid that things would go bad again. So what would help that child if the parent had the wisdom to do this would be to have a very long, probably get into therapy with it, but also to have a long heart-to-heart with this child and say, I'm sorry that I wasn't here. You have done an incredible job of holding things together, even when it was so hard. I know there were times you didn't know how you were going to feed these kids, and they survived and you survived because of you. And appreciate what that child has done. That is what our ego needs. One of the things it needs, because it's always, always, always had your best interest at heart. It's always been trying to make your life work so that you would be happy and safe. Always work to keep you safe. And it won't be able to let go and relax and go back to the back seat and color until it has full confidence that you, the higher self you, are back and can competently take the wheel. And one thing that will help will be for you to appreciate it. So let's just close our eyes for a moment. Play here for a little bit. Feel your breath. Breathe in and out of your heart center, in the middle of your chest. As if your heart were your breathing organ instead of lungs. Breathe in and out. I'm breathing in. I'm breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. Bring your focus to your heart. Imagine your heart is growing a little bit. On an energy level, your heart has actually no limit whatsoever. Very expansive. And then imagine that you're a tree, a beautiful, strong tree with deep roots. Feel your roots go into the ground and stabilize you. Feel that wonderful stabilization with having that good root system there. Solid and strong. A wind can come up, a strong wind, and it might blow your branches around a little bit, but it won't knock you over. Just feel that. Or see it, or sense it. In this kind of an exercise, some people visualize. Some people see in their mind's eye. Some people feel things in their bodies. Some people just get a sense of things. Some people experience these kinds of things maybe auditorially. They may hear something in their inner ear. Or rarely, but even occasionally, somebody will have a sense of smell. that gives them the experience. However you experience this is correct, is the right way for you. So draw up in your root system. The function of roots is to draw up moisture and nutrients into the tree. So do that now. Let your roots draw up stability, health, abundance, support, love. The earth loves you. Up into your roots, up into your body, and into your heart. And then imagine your roots, your trunk rather, going out through the top of your head and a little ways up the branches, touching the heart of goodness, of health, your higher self, which is connected, securely connected with Source. And the function of leaves in a tree is to take in sunlight through photosynthesis. Let your leaves take in the sunlight of Source energy. And bring it into the twigs and branches and into the trunk. And in through the top of your head, down through your head and into your heart. Breathe. Let the two energies mingle there. And on the next in-breath, breathe up from earth, down from Source. Let the two energies mix in your heart and then breathe it out into your body and out into a sphere of light around you. Breathing in from below and above. The energies mixing in your heart, breathing out into that sphere. In and out. And then think about, bring to mind an aspect of your ego that you don't like. Maybe that you're embarrassed about, or maybe that you're angry with and you wish you could just get rid of. You can't get rid of your ego, not while we're in physical bodies. And you need it. So instead of trying to get rid of, we're going to try to transform. And the first thing is to show appreciation, just like with that child and the family. Because if the child feels appreciated and understood and validated, he or she will more easily be able to let go. So perhaps, that was my cell phone, excuse me. Perhaps this part is a part that is judgmental of other people. Maybe you don't even say those judgmental remarks out loud anymore. Maybe you're on a spiritual path and you've got that message that judging is not good. But maybe you think judgmental things. It takes longer to get control of that one than to say it out loud. And sometimes it might even slip out of our mouths. Try to read between the lines there. Try to see what's really going on with that part. Try to see how the judgment of other people is a way of trying to protect you from feeling bad about yourself, trying to protect your ego, from feeling bad about yourself. That's all it is. So without condoning the judgment, don't condone anything harmful, but talk to that part and express somehow your appreciation for its motivation, for its effort, its intention to help you feel better. And then you can let it know that you can say to it, thank you for trying to help me feel better. And I am back now. And you can go outside and play. You don't need to do this anymore. This will take a while. This won't happen. You won't, if you have that part, you won't immediately transform it by doing this one time. It'll take many times. Maybe you have a part that feels shame. We all have those parts about something. Look at the sense of shame and see that it is an effort back. It developed way back when we lived in tribes. If somebody, it was very important to stay in the tribe for survival, because it was all about survival back then. If somebody did something that was against the unspoken rules, or perhaps spoken, of the tribe, they were shamed in an effort to be able to bring them back into the tribe. So it too was a survival mechanism. So you can thank that sense of shame. You can recognize that it is only ego. It isn't fact. You are not a shameful person, even when your ego does get you into a mess. And even when you have done something harmful, you are not shameful because you are created out of source energy. Appreciate the sense of shame for trying to keep you safe. Recognize that it's only ego. It's only your ego speaking. What about the self-critical part, the inner critic that is most everybody has? The inner critic says things like, whether in words or in feelings, you're not okay. Other people are okay, but you don't have what it takes. You're not going to be okay. Something terrible is going to happen. You're not really a very nice person. People don't really like you. You're too fat or too thin or too tall or too short or too something, too, and then the list goes on. It's a huge, long list. Too something, or you're not enough of something. You're really kind of defective. It's not always in words. You don't always hear this in words. But the feeling can be there. You're really a little defective. You're kind of broken. You're not so good. No wonder we eat too many cookies. That's a terribly painful thing to hear. When you hear that voice or feel the feeling that goes along with it, remember, it is your ego trying to keep you safe. How on earth can putting you down in that way be an effort to keep you safe? Here's how. Your ego believes that you need to be perfect so that nobody will hurt you. Nobody will abandon you. Nobody will say mean things to you. That you're justified, and so that you'll go to heaven, because we were taught that you kind of have to be a little perfect to go to heaven, or else you have to believe things that you may have a difficulty believing. You've got to be perfect. You've got to be perfect. And you're not perfect, so your ego reminds you over and over and over, you're not perfect. Get on with it. Make yourself perfect. I'm going to tell you what's wrong with you. You're too this, you're too that, you're broken, you're not good enough. They're doing it right. Do it the way they're doing it. You're not measuring up. When you hear that voice, that's always your ego. Remind yourself that that's all it is. It's your ego. It's trying to help you. thank your ego. I know it's kind of hard to thank yourself, your inner critic, because it can be brutal. But do thank it. Appreciate it when you get to where you can. Let it know you appreciate, you thank it for trying to help you be perfect so that you will be safe. As I said, this whole process is a long process. This takes some doing, a while. Or you might be faster at it than I was when I started this process. But it's very worthwhile. Your ego responds well to being appreciated. This doesn't mean you just give it carte blanche to do anything, to hurt people, to become an alcoholic, or to whatever it is, or to go back to, anything. It does not give the ego license to do things that will harm you or somebody else. It, however, does help it to come back into balance more. And at some point, it will eventually become willing to climb back in the back seat again in color and let you, the higher self, take the wheel again. So let's imagine that. Not in a car, not that analogy. But imagine that your higher self is residing above your head somewhere, maybe one of those branches of the tree. Imagine that you open the top of your head up and you invite that higher self to come in and fill your whole being. Imagine that you can just pretend that it's coming now, fills your head and your neck, your shoulders and arms, and your upper torso and your lower torso, and your legs. Take a breath. Take a breath. And now imagine that your higher self is at the wheel again. And that your ego is in the back seat where it belongs, happy. When things are in their proper place, your ego is in balance, it's happy, it's helpful. It'll say, Mom, you missed that turn. Mom looks at the GPS and says, oh, you're right, thanks, honey. It's a helper in this silly example. But the ego was meant to be a help, not to take over everything. Now, your ego will probably go back and forth between the back seat and the front seat for a while. Notice if you hear your ego criticizing your ego, because that'll happen. One part will criticize another part. You were supposed to let the higher self take over. That's more ego. Thank it. Thank you for trying to get us to be perfect. I say us, me and all my parts. I am here. I am here. You can relax. Practice this if you like, if you resonate with this. Breathe in now. Breathe in and out of your heart. In and out. In and out. Feeling yourself completely filled and surrounded, even by your higher self essence, divine essence. Feel it going into your roots too, helping the earth. Breathing in, breathing out. If you're able, you might want to stay in this space for a few minutes. If not, if you have things to do right away, try to bring as much of this space with you, this appreciation for your ego, love for it, compassion for everything it has been through, and the knowledge that all of those painful, hurtful voices that you hear or feelings about you are not true. They are the ego trying to keep you safe. Appreciate it. Call in your higher self. I'm going to end now. Many blessings.